I see what ho, chaps and chapettes, Game Chap and Bert here.
Yes.
Yes, indeed, fellows, and I dare say we have some news here for you about one of the foremost companies in the gaming industry, and I dare say it's quite sad, is it not, old chap?
Well, it most certainly is, yes indeed. Now you may remember the slogan or the announcement, Sega. Well, it was like that anyway.
Yes, Sega, that's right.
Most certainly. A very big company back in the day with extremely popular games. Now it seems that now Sega, or Sega as we shall say, has announced that they are going to be axing 300 jobs and are planning to all but stop physical releases of games. Of course, they already stopped consoles in the past. In other words, it's all over.
My goodness, really, old chap. So basically, their announcement is they're axing a bunch of staff, as Bertie has just said, and also all but knocking on the head the idea of physical game releases. I mean, goodness me, that's terrible news.
Oh, it most certainly is. Yes, of course, particularly considering their past successes many years ago with this. And of course, it's been bobbing around since, but now we've got this. The end. Is this the end of Sega?
Well, I don't know, but this news certainly means, fellows, that Sega are in some serious trouble. And it seems that this is largely due to the poor sales results of Sonic Boom, the recent game for Wii U and 3DS.
Most certainly. Now, I think we've got some gameplay of this going at the moment, haven't we?
Yes, now Sonic Boom did get quite a lot of criticism, I understand, Elchip, and do we have any idea of how many copies it sold?
Well, most certainly. Criticism it did get, of course. They tried to bring him back in all his glory perhaps from years gone by, and it just wasn't received. It just flopped. And I think the game, it sold 180,000 copies on each platform, I think, Wii U, 3DS, which really is very, very small numbers indeed.
Just 360,000 total copies.
Oh,
That's not many, old boy. Goodness me. No. So why are Sega in such trouble, or Sega, and where did it all go wrong?
Well, it's a very good question, really, because if you can remember back, I mean, in the day, they had the Sega Mega Drive. Remember the Sega Mega Drive?
The Sega Genesis in North America, that's right.
Yeah, the Sega Mega Drive, or the Sega Genesis in North America. We used to call it the Mega Drive over here.
That's right.
But hugely popular console back then.
It was.
And arguably their strongest console, launched in the USA, I think, on the 14th of August of 1989. So really going back there.
89, I
Most
say.
certainly.
Well, this console was, of course, a serious threat, fellows, to the Super Nintendo at the time.
Oh, yes.
And it had some heavy-hitting titles like Sonic the Hedgehog 2, Aladdin, Echo the Dolphin, The Lion King, Sonic 3 and Knuckles, and others.
Well, wait a minute, the nostalgia there, as you said, those titles.
So much nostalgia in just so few words.
Yeah, I'm sure some of the chaps and chapettes that go back that far can remember. Hang on a minute, Aladdin, Echo the Dolphin,
yes.
Sonic the Hedgehog 2, etc.
Oh, yes.
The Lion King!
Yes, indeed. Now, in those days...
I can't believe it! They'll just be saying, oh, yes, the nostalgia.
You really had quite a great selection of games on the Mega Drive back in those days, and Mario was popular, but Sega was a serious rival. Sega, I think, LJ.
Sega, yes, most certainly. I mean, Mario and Sonic were there, literally shoulder to shoulder. I mean, he was as big, Sonic was as big as Mario. It was a very, very, hotly contested sort of competition going on there.
That's right. And if you were a Mario fan in those days, fellows, I mean, you were seriously scared of Sonic, you know. He was a threat, I say, a serious threat.
Most certainly. I think you could say that the characters were practically neck and neck.
They were, I think so. And Sonic, of course, very popular thanks to his cool guy with attitude image, and he sold a lot of copies.
Most certainly. I think Sonic 1, for example, just sold over 15 million copies.
I say.
With Sonic 2 moving 6 million, and Aladdin impressive, 4 million copies. And that's a lot of copies for games.
That's right.
And it was competing with Nintendo back there. So we had a company here, Sega, very, very successful back then.
That's right, of course, I also fondly remember those Sonic games, and by comparison, Super Mario World, a juggernaut of the game's history, sold 20 million, which is just 5 million more than Sonic's one, and Super Mario World 2 only shifted 4 million copies. Now that's why the two mascots, Mario and Sonic, were such bitter rivals back there, and if you were around back then, you probably can still remember them or consider them to be bitter rivals.
Most certainly, and when you just said that, Super Mario 2, 4 million, and you had Aladdin at 4 million,
yes.
You can see just how popular this console was. So what on earth has happened to them?
Well, indeed. You see, after the Mega Drive came along the Sega Saturn, which was 32-bit. Now, that little baby had CDs instead of cartridges and featured an impressive 8 processors, competing with systems like the Sony PlayStation. So they put forward a strong card there.
They most certainly did put a strong thing with the Sega Saturn when that came in. As you say, I think it took Sega CDs instead of the cartridges, etc.
That's right.
And of course, they were, as we said, bitter rivals, with one console coming out the other, and of course, characters and games they were competing with. Of course, at the moment, I think Nintendo and Sega are rather more friendly because Sega's just, gone to work for them almost.
I know, they've been defeated.
It's a shame, really.
It is a shame. But however, the Saturn did not match the success of the predecessor, sadly, and it sold just 9.5 million consoles worldwide. Partly, they say, because of a lack of Sonic titles on the platform.
Well, most certainly. Now, was this the beginnings of the first mistakes, or strategic business mistakes, if you like, by Sega?
I think so.
They brought out a huge console. The Sega Saturn, it was big in the day. Oh, look, it takes these discs. It was all modern. We all thought it was Star Trek.
8 processors, I mean.
8 processors, the whole thing.
Yes.
With all a load of flashy sort of sales hype, etc. And then they don't put Sonic on it.
I know. Why?
I mean, where's Sonic? Where was he? Goodness me.
Why do that? The Saturn also had high production costs, reducing its profitability for Sega. But the finishing blow was arguably the launch of the Nintendo 64, which was revolutionary at the time with its 3D graphics. I mean, they were simply unlike anything else seen before, and they really took the market by storm.
It most certainly did, of course. Up to then, you had both those consoles fighting each other. I think the Sega Mega Drive, or what they called it in
the Saturn after that, and the Genesis, of course.
The Sega Genesis, if you wonder what we're talking about, the Sega Genesis was right up there with the SNES,
yes,
etc. And of course, they then brought out the Saturn, and as you've just said there, then Nintendo launched the 64, and of course, that was a very, very big console, revolutionary in its day, and absolutely, it just took the whole gaming thing by storm, I think, at the time.
You had amazing games back then like Mario 64 and Wave Race, and they really were groundbreaking, much more so than any game we've had lately. They were just completely new, old chap. There was nothing like them.
Oh yes, I can remember the consoles in the toy shops and things.
Oh yes.
You'd see them there, and they had them set up. You'd just never seen anything like it, and there was huge queues.
It was astonishing.
With the kids, they were just lining up and just trying to play the game, have a go of it, you see.
It was incredible. But of course, Sega's next plan was to try to beat the competition by bringing out a system so powerful that it would grab everyone's attention.
Most certainly, and of course, what was that? You may remember the Sega Dreamcast was launched on September 9th, I believe, 1999, over in the USA.
I see, the Dreamcast. Now, this is, of course, a console that many people hold very fondly in their memories. It featured impressive 3D graphics and a strong library of titles like Sonic Adventure, Shenmue, and Crazy Taxi, and it aimed to outgun the competing systems like the Nintendo 64 and PlayStation, whilst also pipping Sony to the post ahead of the PS2 launch.
Most certainly, good point there. Pipping them to the post, sir, with the PS2.
Quite risky, I think.
Yes, and there was a lot of hype surrounding the Dreamcast, and it was considered to be a very worthy console at the time.
Oh, yes, yes, definitely.
Unfortunately, however, its comparatively strong start in Japan was hampered by failures in the manufacturing process, which meant that the stock was severely limited. And Sega estimated that they lost 200 to 300,000 console sales in Japan as a result of the limitations. I mean, for goodness sake, 200 to 300,000 consoles times whatever the console is, that's a lot of profit that you've lost through a marketing mistake.
So they basically flashed away these millions of dollars because of a hardware manufacturing failures and consequently stock shortages. That's shocking, old chap.
Well, most certainly. Also, some Japanese customers were apparently returning the Dreamcast and using the money to buy more PlayStation games.
Oh no!
I mean, for goodness sake, what happened to them?
That's bad. That's very bad.
Marketing errors there beginning to surface, and perhaps digging the grave, as it were.
I
deeper.
think so. Now, they reduced the Dreamcast price after that. Once again, they perhaps were thinking there that they could get some more sales by selling to more people at a lower price. However, that did mean they weren't making a profit on the console anymore.
Most certainly. Now, this did increase sales to the user base, I think, but as you say, not really making as much profit anymore.
That's right. Meanwhile, in the States, EA said they weren't going to be making games for the system over the licensing issues. However, despite these hiccups, it seems the Dreamcast had some strong sales in both Europe and the US during the launch window.
Most certainly. So you see, as we're talking here, and no doubt many of you are listening to this and thinking, yes, I remember those consoles, and yes, or whatever, you may or may not remember them. We're actually building a picture here of just how strong this Sega company actually was, with some very powerful consoles, some very good ideas, and some cutting-edge, top-of-the-market games and characters out there.
I mean, yes, just look at those two high points. You've got the Mega Drive and the Genesis, an absolute high point for the company, competing with the juggernaut Nintendo with Sonic there, up there in the sales figures of 15 million, very impressive. And then, of course, at the start of the Dreamcast, it was very strong. Lots of people were talking about it. It was a good competing console in the market. But where did it all go wrong?
Well, yes, indeed. Things did indeed seem to go downhill as the Sony hype machine went into full swing, and everyone believed the PS2 was some kind of supercomputer.
That's right. They thought it could process the entire contents of the universe or something, Elchip. It was really heavily hyped as being an extremely powerful console, the PS2.
Yeah, of course. Now, at the same time, Nintendo and Microsoft, they stepped up to the plate and started bringing out their own big guns.
The GameCube and the Xbox, that's right.
Most certainly. Now, the Dreamcast was ultimately lost to the mists of time, outgunned by its rivals, just as the Saturn had been years before.
I say, that's terrible, isn't it, old chap? So basically, history did indeed repeat itself there, as the console was basically outgunned and blasted off the shelves.
Well, most certainly, yes, indeed. Now, if you're interested, just listen to what the president of Sega America had to say about this discontinuation.
Yes, I'll say this, old boy.
Go
He
ahead.
said, we were selling 50,000 units per day, then 60,000, then 100,000, but it was just not going to be enough to get the critical mass to take on the launch of the PS2. It was a big stakes game. Sega had the option of pouring in more money and going bankrupt, and they decided they wanted to live to fight another day.
Well, most certainly is indeed. That was their idea back then. Of course, after that, they were out of the game, basically. See, so you take a chance when you make a decision like that. And obviously it didn't go too well.
That's right. I mean, that has very strange parallels to the current news, old boy. They said on January the 31st, 2001, they announced the discontinuation of the Dreamcast after March of that year, which of course means that basically they saved the company by not pouring in huge sums of cash and going bankrupt to try to promote this thing, but in doing so, they drove the final nail through the coffin of their console sales. And what I'm concerned about, old boy, is have they done the same here for their game sales?
Well, I think it looks exactly that they have done, history repeating itself in a way.
It's terrible.
The same thing again. And we had this big company, Sega. A lot of people like Sega.
They do.
And they remember it, you see, but it's just gone. Now, what did they do after the Dreamcast? Well, you see, now they partnered with Nintendo.
More or less, yes.
They produced such as Mario and Sonic at Olympic Games. Now that was successful, it was a good game.
Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games, very successful, in fact, quite enjoyable games. They did those well, old chap.
They did, yes. Now there were no new Mario and Sonic type titles after that, as far as I know.
That's right.
You see, now that was once again, perhaps a bit of a mistake, you see.
That's right, they had that very good collaboration with Mario there, but after that we didn't really see much of the same sort of quality. I mean, we had Sonic All-Stars Racing or something like that. I don't remember the exact name, I do apologise, but we had the racing game there,
yes,
which was quite popular, but other than those two, not really a huge number of popular titles. And of course, on the other flip side of the coin, there were lots of failed and widely criticised Sonic games.
Most certainly, yes indeed. Now this is perhaps why we didn't see any more Mario and Sonics, because Mario and Sonic together popular. Maybe Nintendo perhaps said behind the scenes some of that's very good, but we're not going to sort of bring Sonic back from the dead, as it were, with Mario propping him up. You see, it's possible they said that. So they've tried to make other games with just Sonic, and it's gone down because they lost the momentum years ago.
That's right, and I mean, Nintendo, in fairness, they have done their bit to promote Sonic, old chap. I mean, he's in Super Smash Brothers, he's on the various Mario sort of websites and game sales sites. You can see Sonic's, and indeed also his games on the console.
Yes.
There's many chances you have to buy Sonic games on Nintendo platforms.
A remembered relic.
But yes, he is a bit like a sort of a relic from the past, old chap. I mean, if you think about it, I think arguably his older retro 16-bit self is actually a lot more popular than his current self, and that's never a good sign, old chap.
It most certainly is, because you've lost 10 years or whatever it is, 10 or 12 years. That's like a young generation there, if you like, and they've lost it. You see, they just cut it off, lost it, and so they haven't been. People haven't grown up with him like they have Mario.
I mean, yes. I mean, many of you listening right now may not have even played or even seen the Dreamcast before. It may be before your time. So it really is a console that was shut down now 14 years ago, and as such, Sega just haven't been heard from in that area, as Bertie said, for so many years. And I think it's starting to notice, El Chap.
Well, most certainly, and it's all over now. And you see, so the question that surely arises then is, what next?
What next? That is the question for Sega fans. Well, they have said they will be focusing heavily on Sonic.
Hang on a minute, focusing heavily on Sonic, shouldn't they have done that years ago?
Just a minute, old boy. I think they've been focusing heavily on Sonic all this time, old chap, but they haven't been getting it right. They've been doing lots of games that are not necessarily very high quality and looking to cash in on Sonic's popularity, perhaps. I don't know for sure, but it seems certainly from games like Sonic Boom that that's where they've been going.
Well, yes, indeed, but Sonic Boom didn't cut it, did it?
No, perhaps people saw through the glossy cutscenes and said, well, this game, when it comes down to it, is not really all that good.
Well, I mean, certainly.
I mean, you can't dare compare Sonic Boom to the likes of Sonic 2 and Sonic 3 back in the old days. There's just no comparison at all in terms of gameplay.
Well, I don't think so.
Yes, now Sega's plan going forward apparently is to go mainly digital in future, as opposed to releasing games on consoles. That's right, as we said, physical releases out the window, and they'll concentrate on, steal yourself, fellows, they're going to concentrate on mobile games and online PC games, once again meaning that physical releases will take a back seat. And as soon as any publisher says we're going to focus on mobile, that's a very bad sign.
Well, most certainly it is, yes indeed, because they're not producing, the main physical releases, as it were, and just as you said there, just digital mobile games, online PC, things like that. And of course, since
it's a shame, old chap.
Well, yes,
it really is.
They're going to say, well, they're saying they're going to be good, focusing on Sonic, but the games that they've done which aren't Sonic in the past have not been very popular. So I don't know what this all means, but it's mixing all around in a big bucket, and it's not looking very good.
It's such a shame, old chap. Does this mean we'll be seeing old properties like Sonic and Echo the Dolphin on your iPad and your iPhone and your Android device? It just doesn't seem right, old chap. These are console games. You can't just desecrate the brand like that. It's terrible. It really is. For Nintendo fans, it would be like having Mario on iPad and no longer on consoles. It's just awful, old chap.
Well, yes, unfortunately, it's a shame for Sega, but it looks like they're retreating, and then they have to retreat again, and then again, and they're backing up as they go, and now they've come to this. So it's going to take something big, perhaps, or revolutionary to bring them out of this position, as it were.
It looks to me very much as if they're making their final stand in their capital city, old chap. It's not very good, but I do hope for their sake and for the Sega fans out there that there is some kind of hope for them. I mean, it doesn't look good at the moment, old chap, but certainly, for we can just report to you the news and what goes on, now.
Well, most certainly Sega on the ropes, or should we say not on the ropes, but more probably on the canvas.
I think they're on the canvas. It's sad. I'm not laughing, old boy. It's a sad time for the gaming industry to lose such a veteran company, and I genuinely am disappointed, old chap, to see them go down like this.
Well, it is.
It's very sad, but there you are.
I mean, what do you think out there, chaps and chapettes? If you obviously remember their games, and if not, you've surely played them since. What do you think about that? Do you think they've made a big error? Do you think you wish they'd come back and you like Sonic anyway, and you'd like to see some more of Echo the Dolphin or something like that, or whatever?
Well, indeed. Let us know what you think, fellows, for this hasn't it been Game Chef and Birdie bring you the latest news in the gaming industry, and I dare say we'll report more to you as and when it comes out, I say.
We most certainly will, yes indeed, and of course don't forget also to have a look at our other channel, the Chaps Play, where we're doing a bit of a walkthrough of a rather more popular game called Captain Toad.
Yes, indeed, Captain. Rather fun, I say.
Fun, yes, indeed.
Good old Captain, do check that out, I say. We look forward to seeing you once more, fellows, in the next exciting out of my word.
Well,
Until then.